Good morning and welcome to this week's Signpost Series webinar. I'm Tom O'Dwyer and I'm going to host this morning's webinar. I'm joined by my Teagasc colleague Méabh O'Hagan, who is going to help with questions later on this morning. So good morning, Méabh.
Good morning, Tom. How are things?
I'm very good, thank you. And this morning we have two presenters lined up, two Teagasc colleagues as it happens. The first is John Greaney and the second is Niamh Barry. So good morning, John and Niamh. You're very welcome to this week's Signpost Series webinar.
Good morning, folks. Thanks for having me.
Morning.
Yeah. So John, I understand you're going to present on an EU-funded project. So I should tell our listeners about what we have planned for this morning first before coming to you, I suppose. So on this morning's program, we're going to hear about two projects that are helping to support climate action across Europe, or climate action by farmers actually across Europe. The first project, which John will talk about, is Climate Farm Demo, and this is a European funded project focusing on accelerating the adoption of climate smart farming practices and solutions by farmers. So helping farmers to adopt practices which can benefit their farm and also benefit the climate. The second project, which will be presented by Niamh, is called ClimateSmart Advisors, and it's also a European funded project. It is focusing on the role of advisors and building the capacity of advisors to give targeted and effective climate advice to support farmers. So the first project is supporting farmers directly. The second is about building the capacity of advisors. So John, just before we go to the presentations, you're heading up this Climate Farm Demo project. It involves demonstration farmers. And I understand from you that that you have worked with demonstration farmers before in your career.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, folks. Yeah, so look, I've worked with Teagasc since I graduated many moons ago at this stage. But I previously worked on different joint programs and in an advisory role as a local B&T advisor as well. So look, I'd like to think I've plenty of experience working with farmers on a one-to-one basis or in a group setting. So look, as we go through the presentation, you'll see that we've recruited a number of farmers within Ireland for the project. So yeah, look, we've the foundations are in place, and look, the project is beginning to get going finally. Thanks God.
Okay, all right. And Niamh, to you, you have joined Teagasc in the last 12 months. You're working on this project to support advisors. I suppose your career to date, you've had a somewhat varied career, but you have worked with advisors previously as well.
Yes, so I was an agricultural consultant over in Scotland till I got the opportunity to come home and work for Teagasc. So I've been working with advisors, and I also have done a research master's as well. So I've kind of gotten to be on both sides of the fence in terms of looking at research and on actually working with advisors. So it's nice to get to work in this project because it kind of molds everything nicely together.
Okay, good. All right. Well, look, we'll start the presentations then. So I understand John is going to lead off with the Climate Farm Demo project, and then we'll follow directly with your presentation, Niamh. And I just remind our viewers this morning that you can post any questions or comments for John or Niamh on the Q&A function. So use the Q&A function, and following Niamh's presentation, then Méabh and I then will put as many of your questions as possible to both John and Niamh. Okay, so over to you then, John.
Okay, Tom, so my screen should be sharing there. If there's any issue with the
Yes.
presentation, please cut across me and say so, okay? Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm working as a national coordinator for the Climate Farm Demo project within Ireland, and I'm also working in an advisor role as well. So I'm working with the farmers that we've recruited to date. Some of our listeners, Tom, might be aware of the project or come across the project before. And there's probably those that are probably hearing about it for the first time this morning. So I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour of maybe the background to the project. So there's a lot going on in terms of KPIs and metrics, and I suppose wheels moving in the background, but I'm just going to pick on some of maybe the important things this morning. I'm just conscious of time. So look, on the left, we've got some of the main objectives of the project. So to establish a network of pilot demo farmers to boost climate smart farming knowledge exchange and cross-fertilization among agricultural sectors. So in a nutshell, there's 1,500 farmers recruited across 27 EU countries, and 61 of which are recruited here in Ireland. So Teagasc is the main partner of 80 partners involved in the project. The second main objective is to support and advise pilot demo farms in implementing and demonstrating the climate smart farming practices to increase innovation uptake. So this is generally a three-pronged approach, where the number one, I suppose there's an audit carried out on farm, which I'll delve into further later in the presentation. There's an action plan then that's carried out. So maybe how the farmer is going to implement a positive change on farm or reduce overall emissions. And then three, look, there's a demo event or there's peer-to-peer learning activity taking place on farm. The final one, which probably later down the line in the project, is to incentivize the adaptation of climate smart farming practices across Europe, thanks to standardized methodologies and relevant rewarding mechanisms. Okay, so just in relation to the screen grab, as on the right of the screen, down the bottom left, is in terms of the impact. So the impact, and I suppose, is very much in twine with the 2030 targets that we've set, as it's an EU project. So at least 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, 4,500 on-farm demonstrations, so 1,500 farmers at 3 events on each farm, so an event maybe every second year. So the first event could be tailored around maybe the baseline figures, where the farm is at, and maybe the goals that we set, be it the short-term, medium or long-term goals, and maybe how we're going to achieve it. Second event maybe might focus on how we're getting on, and the final event might showcase maybe the changes that have taken place down the line as we reach at the end of the project, be it in 2029, okay? Ultimately, we want to have a high positive impact on farmers, agribusiness, consumers, and society. So I'm aware that a lot of the listeners on this morning aren't in fact farmers, and that's okay too. As in, look, a lot of the public events, or all the public events, are open to the wider agricultural industry. In relation to the farms that we've recruited, and I'll go through the numbers in a second, we do have a mix of animal husbandry or mixed farm systems, so our dairy, beef, sheep. We have a number of organic farms, and we have a number of tillage farms involved in the project. Okay, to the right of the graphic, we are involved in sister projects. So Niamh Barry, a colleague who's on this morning as well, is involved in ClimateSmart Advisors. We've ties with that project, and Niamh Phelan's involved in Clean Farms, which we've ties with as well. Okay. In terms of the climate smart farming solutions, down the bottom right, long-term advice to 1,500 pilot demonstration farmers. So myself, working as a climate farm advisor here, I'm trying to give long-term advice and practical advice to farmers that are recruited within Ireland, a broad use of the climate carbon tool. So AgNav is our tool of choice in this country. So look, we'll be going through that, or I'll be going through that later on in the presentation. And finally, look, we've practical solutions on 12 adaptation, mitigation, thematic areas. So look, I'll maybe touch briefly on some of the areas that we're focusing on farm at the minute. In relation to maybe why would these farmers, what was in it for them, or why do they want to get involved in this project? Okay, so it offers farmers the opportunity, the farmers that we've recruited, to receive close support from a dedicated advisor for 6 years on climate mitigation and adaptation, to improve technical aspects on their farm, so be it breeding management, crops, nutrient management, grassland, soil fertility, etc., to improve the farm efficiency, reduce operational costs, and reduce climate impact, and hopefully improve overall profitability on these farms, to be informed about funding opportunities and carbon rewarding mechanisms. Okay, so look, as we edge towards maybe a new cap in 2027, maybe what's coming down the line, to assess applicable methods and tools for climate smart farming practices. So again, to touch on the AgNav tool, to receive the latest research results and practical solutions produced in the region. So I suppose firsthand, be it the research that's taken place at a lot of our centres, be it in Moore Park, be it in Grange for the dry stock, or even here in Athenry for the sheep side of the house. To participate in a 6-year peer-to-peer learning knowledge exchange programme through cross visits abroad and events in their region. So look, ultimately, with the 1,500 farmers that are recruited across Europe, there's a world of information, be it within country and across countries. Okay, so just to give an overview of where the farms are located in Ireland and across Europe, a screen grab on the left of our screen here. Okay, so 61 or 60 odd dots. As you can see, look, we've 12 advisory regions in Teagasc, and I'm happy to announce that, look, we have farms within all these regions, okay, or numerous farms in some of the regions. A screen grab on the right, look, probably gives a detailed view of just how big, and probably just showcases the 400 or 1,500, sorry, farms that are recruited across Europe, highlighting, I suppose, the size of the project and the number of farms involved in the project. A breakdown of the farms across Ireland. Okay, so as I outlined, we've 61 farmers recruited in total, 36 of which are dairy, 21 are beef, and a number of these farms have sheep too, and we've 4 tillage. 18 of the farms are existing signpost farmers. So look, this project, albeit on a European level, is very, very similar to the network of signpost farms we've recruited. So we're selling the same messages and trying to implement positive changes on these farms. Several of the farms are former or current demonstration farms. So look, they were eager and put themselves forward again for this project, as it probably linked in with maybe some of maybe what was happening, or some of the key messages that was happening on previous joint programs, be it with the dairy co-ops, so Arrivo joint program, Dairy Gold, North Cork Creameries, Arabon, Curry, etc. Also some of the projects on the dry stock side of the house, so Dairy Beef 500, etc. And 5 of the farms are organic farms. Okay, so Climate Farm Demo Annual Meeting in Moorpark, October 23. So talking a lot about the farmers, but in relation to some of the advisors that are working on the project. So look, I had the pleasure of organising a 3-day event in Moorpark last back end. Okay, so over 160 agricultural professionals gathered in Cork to advance climate smart farming practice. So Niamh would have been involved in this as well. So the objective of the 3-day event was to enhance collaboration and encourage the implementation of climate smart farming practices throughout the continent. So it was a 3-day event whereby I would have organised events indoor and outdoor. So the advisors would have got a choice to visit either dry stock farms or a dairy event. And I suppose we're quite lucky, and it highlighted to me how lucky we are in Teagasc in terms that our advisory, our research and our education is under the one umbrella, and how easily, I suppose, we take it for granted that we can organise events, and we have a good network of farms there already. Okay, so look, the event on the dry stock side of the house would have taken place on Pat Collins's farm, a Dairy Beef 500 farm outside Castlemartyr in Cork. He's finishing an awful lot of bulls on that farm. Okay, and Joe Morrissey would have opened his farm gates to dairy side of the house, and he's a small farm shop on the farm as well. So look, ultimately there was workshop sessions and activities on climate smart farming demonstrations, adaptation, mitigation practices, and on-farm audits. And look, what it highlighted, I suppose, to myself and Niamh would have been that all advisors across Europe are facing the same challenges, be it in Western Europe with adverse weather. And look, even there recently, the temperatures in Greece are, I think they're soaring to over 42 or 43. Okay, so look, a lot of the challenges are quite similar for advisors across Europe. In relation to Teagasc and maybe some of the tasks that are happening behind the scenes. Okay, so we're leading work package 3 in the project, okay, which is supporting demo activities. So task 1 will be preparing for climate farm demo events. So look, as I mentioned there, we're probably very, very good at this stage. We're well used to, we're experienced at organising events. Okay, so look, we're ultimately helping the advisors across the project to prepare for climate farm demo events. So I would have put together, with the help of a number of colleagues, an on-farm demo design guide, I suppose, which implements or which highlights how to carry out an on-farm or best practice of demo events on the ground. Task 2 will be supporting and facilitating annual climate farm demo campaigns. Task 3 will be learning from and continuously improving the climate farm demo activities. So the monitoring and evaluation of events. Okay, so look, whereby an event takes place in the project, there's a post-event survey to be carried out. So look, we're trying to learn continuously from the events that are taking place, be it in Ireland and across Europe. Task 4 will be managing, coordinating and monitoring climate farm demo events to ensure that, look, the 27 countries are hosting events and having events, and look, whereby events haven't taken place to date in certain countries, I'll be contacting advisors and making sure, that they're okay, or do they need any advice or hand holding in relation to getting events off the ground. And task 5 will be building the farmer and advisory capacity for climate farm demo events. So any training needs, which look, Niamh Barry is definitely going to touch on later in our presentation, but any training needs that, look, maybe advisors are looking for and putting together maybe a training day or a training pack. Okay, in relation to the work completed to date, working our way up from the bottom, it's very much a three-pronged approach in terms of the graphic on the top right-hand corner, in relation to one being the audit, two being the action plan or the AMP, and three being the demo event. But look, at all times, the farmer is core and centre to everything that's happening within the project. We have recruited the farms, okay, down the bottom left. 61 farms are recruited and they're registered on the back office. Okay, so each farm is registered online and received its dedicated ID number. Two, all the carbon audits, which I'll touch on a second with the AgNav tool, have been completed. And now I'm just trying to get out on farm and I suppose go through this workload and maybe go through some of the reports and make sure that the farmers understand their own figures and maybe where they want to go in terms of implementing an action plan or how they plan on reducing these overall emissions on farm. 5 is the demo events. So look, 10 events have taken place to date across the spring and early summer. We've 2 events scheduled for next month, and all events must be registered for the actual event on the CFD or the Climate Farm Demo back office, which is available to all advisors. And as I mentioned, in terms of our monitoring and evaluation, a post-event survey must be filled out after each event, highlighting maybe what worked well and maybe something that needs to be improved. Okay, in relation to AgNav, so look, I'm well aware that lots of our listeners would have come across AgNav or would have workings with it to date. Okay, so it's a tool that's put together through a collaboration with Teagasc, Borbia, and ICBF. And again, it's probably a three-pronged approach in terms that it accesses the data or assesses the data that's already there. So the production data, be it from a dairy point of view, the milk output, or from a beef point of view, the beef output. Okay, and it cross-references that then with the data that would have been provided from the farmer from the sustainability, his or her sustainability survey. So be it the fertilizer that was sown on the farm, the meal that was fed, grazing dates, turnout dates, slurry, type of fertilizer, etc. Okay, so it analyzes that data and it calculates the emissions that are, I suppose, taking place on farm. And it gives you the opportunity then to use a forecaster. So picking certain adaptation mitigation actions, it gives the farmer an opportunity to see what action or what measure will reduce the emissions on farm. And then finally, an action planner can be put in place. So look, I know it's quite small, but the screen grab on the right here is a screen grab from the AgNav planner where by a dairy farmer is given its total emissions. So per kilos or in relation to 1,188 tons of CO2 equivalent on farm. The emissions then is broken down per hectare, but I suppose a big one from an advisor point of view is the kilos of CO2 equivalent per kg of fat and protein corrected milk. So this farm is very much on its way to being extremely efficient in terms of the emissions that are outputted on farm. So a target there will be roughly 0.7 or 0.75 kgs of CO2 equivalent. So this farmer is very, very close to hitting that target. Okay, so in relation to the events that have taken place across different countries and the thematic areas that were outlined, I suppose, are the 12 thematic areas that we're focused on, which I introduced on the first slide. So you can see on the left, look, events are taking place, which is good to see across all the countries. So Estonia, Germany, Portugal, Finland, Ireland. Look, we have 10 events as I outlined, and look, France and Spain are leading the way with 15 events to date. Okay, in relation to the thematic areas that we're focusing on, so look, these are the 12 thematic areas, but you can see the number of events that are associated with each one. So energy management 28, rewarding mechanisms, water management, but you can see down the bottom a big one, and I suppose it's something that we too have focused on here in Teagasc over the last number of years, and look, since I've maybe taken up an advisory role, would be soil health or soil fertility. So look, 65 events have touched on this area. Okay, and finally, okay, so the key messages are a few key points that I wanted to make aware to our listeners. So look, there's public events and they're open to all, so everyone is welcome to these events. These events are registered on the website, so Climate Farm Demo, www.climatefarmdemo.com. Okay, so look, anyone that's interested in coming along to these website can see on the calendar that upcoming events. So they're registered 4 to 8 weeks in advance of the events taking place. Farmers are central to everything we in the project. So be it the events, everything is tailored around the farming system and what's happening on the ground, and the direction that these farmers want to take and are willing to take. Okay, implementing and demonstrating climate smart solutions for a carbon neutral Europe. Okay, so again, our action plans are focused around this. Synergies between reductions in emissions and increased overall profitability. So look, an awful lot of all the adaptation mitigation actions that these farmers are picking and choosing. Okay, so one, they're reducing the overall emissions on farm, but two, they're also increasing the profitability and leaving a bit more money in their back pocket. Okay, so it's very much so a peer-to-peer learning approach. In relation to, look, it'll be mainly that our farmers are taken front and center at these events. Okay, so look, I've spoken so much there about the pilot demo farmers and everything that's happening in relation to the farmer. So Niamh is just going to take you through now, I think, a short presentation in relation to, I suppose, how can these advisors support the farmers.
Perfect. Thank you, John. I'll just go share mine now.
Thanks very much, John. So if Niamh, you can just share your screen. There you go. Yeah, you have your screen now. Yeah, okay.
Ideal. Thank you. Thanks, John, for the introduction. So as John was saying, the Climate Farm demo is working very much with the farmers and getting out on the ground and everything. And then the ClimateSmart Advisors project, which I'm working on, is focusing on the advisors, as you can tell by the name. It gives it away. So I suppose going on from there. Just to give you a bit of background on the ClimateSmart Advisors project. So the whole aim of the project is to mobilize the European agricultural advisory community, because I suppose if you're able to have 27 countries running together and working and trying to find synergies for working towards our climate action goals, we'll get there a lot faster than if we were all working individually. So this in turn should lead to an acceleration of the adoption of climate smart farming practices. And the project itself is hoping to do this by boosting the role of agricultural advisory services by strengthening the advisors' capacity. And John gave you the run through of the Climate Farm demo and the approaches and the solutions that are hoping to be coming out of that. And we're hoping to pull from that and bring that into this project as well. So it just kind of has a nice flow between the two sister projects. So as I mentioned, there's 27 countries involved in this project, and in Ireland there's two partner organisations. It's Teagasc and the Agricultural Consultants Association, and I suppose across the whole EU side of things, there's a number of partner organisations and advisory organisations. You have a mix of public, NGOs, and private, and then these cover a wide variety of sectors. So you'll have from agriculture to horticulture to you name it, it's most likely in there. So yeah, and over the duration of the project, it's a 7-year project. It started in March 23 and it's running up to March 2030. So it's a nice long project, and within that there'll be 1,500 advisors that will be trained during that duration. So I suppose you're probably wondering how are we going about doing that, and how are we getting that actually into play, because you can have all the goals you want, but unless you have the method to do so, then you're at nothing. So I suppose the core of this project is communities of practice. So communities of practice is within this project is that you have a group of advisors together that share a common concern, a set of problems, or they're interested in a topic, but pretty much it's going to run similar to a farmer discussion group, except it's for advisors. So within that structure, you have your climate smart coach, which is acting as your facilitator. And then you have other members of it, which are other advisors that act as climate smart advisors. So, and each community of practice is funded for 2 years. So there's a good amount of time to allow for peer-to-peer exchanges to go on and for there to be that joint learning element coming into play. So bringing it back to the Irish context, we actually have started our first community of practice in Ireland. So within this community of practice, we have Teagasc members, ACA members. It's run by Teagasc. I'm actually the climate smart coach for this one. And we're that's after kicking off. And for our first meeting, we went about identifying what areas are challenging and what are the opportunities for advisors to actually be able to support farmers on their climate smart farming journey. So by identifying these areas, we were able to give a kind of a guideline as to where we want to go for the next 2 years. So we'll be focusing on these areas, and we'll be sharing best practices, seeing what works for other people, and pulling information from other communities of practices that are going on across Europe, so that we're all learning and getting that information flow going. And we'll be hoping to create new knowledge as well, and be sharing that as well. And all of this should, in theory, boost our advisory capacity to give climate smart advice. So one of the things that I suppose that was really important for this is that the climate smart coach, which is the facilitator, that there's additional training given to them, because they need to be an effective leader of the community of practice for that to work. So that we have developed trainer workshops that would be run 4 times over the duration of the project. So there's 4 waves in this project, and the trainers will coincide with this. So these workshops, we had our first one kick off in March. We had 40 advisors come from 27 countries, which I think shows that advisors are keen to learn. They're keen to build that capacity, and they want that information. They want the training. So they kindly came to Dublin. So we were hosted in the Teagasc Horticultural College up in Dublin in the Botanics, and for once in March the sun was out, which was a good introduction for a lot of people to Ireland. So then I suppose the train workshops was very much tailored for the group of advisors that we had coming. We did a training needs analysis so that we could identify what areas that they wanted, so that it could be tailored for them. And it was very much get involved, get off your feet, or get on your feet, get out your chair, let's go, and make the most of actually being able to interact in person and test out methods and get used to different things. So the interactive engaging activities included areas such as how to motivate a group with playful and innovative activities, how to communicate clearly with your group, how to foster peer-to-peer learning for participants, and facilitating discussion, and workshops on like practical strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So all of these methods have been written up, and there will be a knowledge repository that will be going live in 2025, and all the methods that were used in this training will be available. I'll give you some more details on that in a little while. But this workshop was great. It was great to see so many engaged people and people wanting to learn. It was run over a 4-day period, so it was intense, but it was great to just get our teeth tucked in and actually get a sense of what's involved as being a climate smart coach. And now all of us as climate smart coaches have gone back to our own countries, and we've made a community of practice, and we're sharing the knowledge that we have learned during this period with our peers. So it's straight away, it's getting implemented. There's no hanging around. So John touched on the thematic areas. The 2 sister projects are covering the same thematic areas, and for each of the community of practices, we needed to pick an area that we wanted to focus more on. So the area that we picked as for the first community of practice in Ireland that we wanted to focus more on is highlighted in the red box here. So we wanted to look at additives for reducing enteric methane emissions. So we'll be kind of trying to gain more technical knowledge and around this, while also developing our soft skills. And each of these 12 thematic areas has a specialist who knows that area inside and out, and they should be releasing public information in the form of like webinars and the likes, so that that information isn't just locked within the project, that it's available for all. So it's worth keeping an eye out on the Climate Smart Advisors website to keep an eye out for things like that. So I suppose just to give you the picture of how it's running in Ireland. So as I was saying before, that there's 2 Irish partners. So there's Teagasc and there's the Agricultural Consultants Association, who I'll just refer to as ACA from now on, because it's just to shorten it a bit. So yeah, we have about 10 community practices to be run in Ireland over the duration of the project. Teagasc is responsible for 6 of these, and ACA is responsible for 4 of these. So I have highlighted, we're in wave 1 at the moment, and highlighted in the red box is our first community practice, and this is one where both partners are involved in it and Teagasc is leading it. So this just because some of the countries, this first wave is our pilot wave. So to make it that all the kinks and all the, if there's any issues or what works well and everything it's all streamlined thereafter for the next wave. So it was thought it was best to, I suppose, save the resources for when you knew it was 110% right and ready to go. So that's why you can see that there's only 1 community of practice running for this wave, but then there's many community practices running thereafter. So that's just to give you the kind of outlay of how it's running at the moment. And then I suppose to give you an overall structure, because as you can imagine, as more communities of practices are kind of getting running and everything, then there's a lot of voices and there's a lot of information that could be lost. So to ensure that there's a flow going on within each country, there's a national coordinator. So there's 1 national coordinator for each country, and this just allows for a flow of information to come down from management of the ClimateSmart Advisors project right down to the community of practice, but also if there's anything that the community of practice is identifying, to run that back as well up the line. So it's just, there's a nice flow in between. And then naturally, of course, the Climate Farm demo project is feeding into this the whole time. So even with our first community of practice meeting, we identified that we want to get out onto farms and see things as well, so that the next meeting that we're going to have, we're actually going to be joining up with John Greaney and going out on one of his farms. So then I suppose going from the national level onto the European level, so I suppose you have your communities practices, and at that stage there's a lot more of them. So that's feeding into each national coordinator. You have 27 national coordinators because there's 27 countries involved, and you have the thematic leaders. There's 12 of them for the 12 thematic areas, feeding into the overall project as well. And then anything that's been found within this project is feeding outside of the project network as well. So it's going beyond. So it's going into different projects, different innovations, and policymakers. So it's not just this project is standing over on its own and that information is locked in. That information is flowing. And that's the whole point. I suppose if we want a universal movement, then everything has to flow both ways. So one of the things that at the beginning of the project is that there was a survey done to base the current state of play for of the level of ClimateSmart advice that's out there. So there was a survey shared to EU advisors, not just within the project, but outside the project as well. And one of the areas that is of particular interest is what are the barriers in particular for implementation of climate actions at farm level. And these were the areas that advisors found of interest. In particular, naturally, they they indicated that economic and financial barriers are a major barrier for getting climate action out at farm level, which is completely fair. A lot of technologies, they're expensive, or it's a change of system. It can be difficult on that front. But I suppose the 2 parts that I want to highlight that are of particular interest, I suppose, for both projects is the fact that there's a belief that the lack of knowledge and the lack of training for farmers and advisors is playing a part as being a barrier as well. I suppose these are 2 areas that can be of interest for the project to be able to tackle, and that we're in that position to be able to help with. And within this, I broke it down as well so that you could see the EU is the yellow color and Ireland is the blue color, so that we could just see what our advisors were feeling in comparison to EU advisors compared to the Irish advisors, just for the Irish context, since we're based, our community of practice and the like is based in Ireland. So as you can see, they're fairly similar. I suppose there's some areas where the EU might feel stronger and Ireland might not, but it's important to just note that I suppose the trajectory is relatively similar. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the project, but in summary, I suppose the advisors are key to learn, and they want to develop their advisory skills in providing targeted advice, and they are a key part of the climate smart transition. So they're very important for this. So they're an important group to target. And the ClimateSmart Advisors project is it's providing a starting point for communities' practices to be developed, and from this for more momentum to be generated. And all of this in turn should mobilize the European agricultural advisory community. And I suppose if you're hearing about this and you're going, geez, I'd love to set up community practice within my own organization or the likes, well, this information, it's not available yet, but because it's only just after going into the second year of the project, but this information will be shared on the ClimateSmart Advisors website, and it will give you guidelines on how to do so. And also, as I mentioned previously, there's a joint knowledge repository that will be available 2025. So this will be available online. It will be rich in climate smart tools and practices and approaches from, and this is a joint effort between all the sister projects. So the Climate Farm Demo, ClimateSmart Advisors, and John also mentioned Clean Farms that Niamh Barry is working on. So that's a combination of those three projects are working together to get this online repository there and made available for everyone. So that if that the methods that were used in the training workshops and the likes, that they're there, they don't have to be recreated. That information is there, and it just allows for that unified front. So that's everything on my end. So thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thanks very much, Niamh. Very interesting to see the results of those surveys that you presented. I'm sure they might lead to some questions. And John, thank you for your presentation also. So I suppose maybe just a question for you, John. The role of the demonstration farmer. You know, your project has decided to focus on using or working with a pool of demonstration farmers across Europe. What do you think what role does a demonstration farmer play in terms of advancing the uptake of certain practices on farm?
Yeah, look, the demo farmers are key, Tom, ultimately to everything that's happening in this project. And look, we've seen from be it events that were organised, be it discussion groups, from be it previous KT schemes and whatnot, that look, the messages are a lot easier to sell if they're coming from a farmer. Okay, why? I suppose, look, ultimately he or she have implemented them changes on the farm, and they've done it practically, and they've come across, I suppose, challenges that they've met, positive and negative feedback. And look, it's a lot easier for a farmer to stand at a farm event and for a group of farmers to listen to him or her, as opposed to me lecturing and talking about maybe something that's happened on a research farm. Look, a lot of these findings are coming from practical advice that's happened on commercial farms.
Okay.
So look, the farm events are imperative to everything that's happening within this project.
And a similar type question for you then, Niamh. Your project is a core part of it is this community of practice concept. You know, why do these communities of practice, why do they work? You know, they're advisors helping each other, you know, rather than maybe bringing in an external expert or trainer to develop skills.
Well, I suppose you can see it working well even in farmer discussion groups, that peers trust each other more than they necessarily trust someone standing up in front of them. So I suppose if you can have that peer-to-peer learning going on, and it just allows that exchange, and I suppose it allows exchange in a safe kind of environment, because you're on the same level with the people in the room with you, and you're all wanting to learn together. So I think that's really important for learning, because you learn as much from mistakes as you do from things going right. So the community of practice allow for that space to be there. So I think it's an effective method that it's been used in, I suppose there's probably different wordings for it being used, but it's been used in many different ways in different projects and the likes as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, Méabh, there's a number of questions on the Q&A, and just to remind our viewers, if you have questions for John or Niamh, please type them into the Q&A, and Méabh and I will put them to John and Niamh as appropriate. Okay, Méabh.
Yeah, the questions are coming in thick and fast now. And lots of comments on two very interesting presentations. I suppose just one question there, that I might just put it to you there, John, is just in terms of the end target for the program itself. You know, what are you, what are you perceiving as being the end goal of the project overall? And I suppose for you, Niamh, as well, like, for John, it's maybe in terms of the farmers themselves, and then for Niamh in terms of like the output from an advisory point of view. I'll go to you, John, first, maybe. You're just on mute there, John, sorry.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, so look, the targets we would have set originally here or the Irish targets that would have been set would be 25% overall reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So look, that aligns very much entwined with the emissions target that's been set for the project in overall in a whole. So 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So this project is running up to 2029 or the October of 2029. So look, our own ambitious target here within Ireland is 25% by 2030. So look, they're very much in sync.
Perfect. And you, Niamh, then just in terms of kind of from an advisory point of view, what do you see as being the end goal?
So I suppose for the end goal would be that if you have by the end of the project, there should be 1,500 advisors trained, and they should be able to give more targeted advice and be more confident in doing so that it opens up that discussion for getting different climate actions out on farm. But I suppose, yeah, that would be kind of the key things, is that the advisors are trained. But I think one of the hopes as well is, even when the funding ends, that these communities of practice, if they're running well, that there will be a natural want for them to kind of continue. They may not be at the same level as they are while they're funded, but the hope is that I suppose it generates momentum, and hopefully that momentum will keep going thereafter.
Well, I suppose, like you said, in terms of trying to kind of broaden the net, like, and what John said, to try and hit that 25% target, the more advisors that are on board with it, I suppose, the better, and the more likely we are to achieve those targets.
100%.
Yeah. And just as well, John, I'd be interested in terms of like the adaptation plans that are being completed for the farmers. What are the most common measures that you're seeing as being needing to be put in place, or where you see potential for improvements on farms?
Yeah, so look, we're focusing on the 12 thematic areas, Niamh. But ultimately, look, the farmers, number one, they want to reduce the overall emissions on farm, but two, they also want to increase profitability. So look, I mentioned in my slides that looked at strong synergies between the measures that they're picking to reduce on-farm emissions, but to increase overall profitability. So look, soil fertility was is a key one. So look, low emission slurry spreading is a big one. Getting more out of the slurry, reducing their overall fertilizer bill. Protected urea, Méabh, is another one. Look, that's been implemented on the ground. There too, I suppose, of the most popular ones, improving overall breeding within and across herd to have higher genetic potential stock and get more in terms of output. So they're probably three of the main ones that come from the top of my head, Méabh. But look, there's a whole list and array of measures and adaptation. But look, no two plans are the same. So look, different farmers probably have different end goals. And look, there's different things happening on every farm.
Yeah, I suppose it's important for it to be farm specific as well. Like you said, no two farms are the same, so it's important for it to be tailored for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I suppose just before I pass back over to Tom there then as well, a couple of questions kind of coming in a similar area in terms of like engagement from farmers. Even in one of your last slides, Niamh, I was a little bit surprised to see that Ireland actually ranked slightly lower versus across the EU in terms of maybe attitudes towards climate change mitigation and stuff like that. And I suppose based off of that, then from both of your experiences, I suppose, Niamh, having worked as an advisor in Scotland, and then John with the project that you're doing now, like, how have you found it in terms of getting farmers involved, getting them on board, and what have you found in terms of their attitudes on the ground towards the overall climate change challenge?
Yeah, so I suppose, particularly when I was working over in Scotland, that if you could make the climate actions and the money match up, that most farmers were more than happy to get involved. But I think a lot of farmers, that there's a negative attitude, because in the nice way possible, farmers do get beaten a bit with a stick, because in terms of reducing emissions, when they are doing their part, and they have been doing their part for a long time in terms of even just like breeding, reducing emissions through breeding and the likes, they've been doing their part over a long period of time. And I suppose some of them feel like they're not getting recognition for doing so. And I think that those feed into the negative attitudes towards it, because they're like, well, I'm just getting beaten with the stick anyway, what's the point? So it's trying to change that around and kind of go, here's a carrot again, please come along.
Yeah, to develop that understanding, I suppose, that it doesn't necessarily need to be that productivity and the environment pull in opposite directions, that they can both move towards the same goal together.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what about you, John, then, in terms of getting demonstration farmers on? In particular, I'd be interested of the new farmers who maybe weren't involved in joint programs or other projects beforehand. You know, what sort of attitudes were you coming across?
Yeah, look, I suppose there's probably a few negative attitudes towards it, or negative vibes, be it in the publicity or be it in the wider public in terms of their views. Um, but no, look, in general, farmers are custodians of the land. You know, they want to pass it on to the next generation in a better state than it was. And look, farmers are hungry for practical and sound advice. So look, the goalposts have changed over the last few years and months, or maybe, like, you know. So look, farmers are probably at a crossroads in many ways, but look, they're hungry for key practical advice, as I suppose, cross compliance, and one thing is going to change, be it by 2027. So look, I think the measures, and farmers will generally follow the money. So and the money are following the adaptation and mitigation measures. So look, they go hand in hand. So in terms of recruiting farmers, no, we didn't have much of a backlash, or we didn't have to go looking too hard. That a lot of the farmers would have put themselves forward for the project.
Yeah, and I think maybe it comes back as well to that graphic that you showed, Niamh, of that survey, which is like that one of the barriers is mixed messages. So I suppose farmers want a clear roadmap available to them for what role they can play in terms of helping to achieve the emissions reduction targets. That's perfect. I'll just pass back over to you, Tom, if you have another question.
Okay, thanks, Méabh. Yeah, and look, I'd concur with that. I think what you hear from farmers, you know, that they want to do the right thing, but tell us where to start. Tell us where we should start. So I guess that's hopefully maybe the benefit that can come from these two projects. That through both projects, there will be demonstration farmers who are clearer on the next steps, or the steps that should be taken, and then there'll be advisors that are also better equipped to support farmers. I just see one of the questions there, and maybe it's a kind of I'll take it, came in from John, but it's in relation to the inclusion of ClimateSmart advice in present-day agri schemes, and I suppose that introduces the whole idea of, you know, incentives, or as Niamh's term, carrots. You know, but schemes generally come with payments, so that suggests incentives. Both projects, to my knowledge, don't necessarily address incentives, but would either of Niamh or John wish to comment on that? You know, how helpful could it be if there were schemes and incentives for farmers to take on certain measures that have been identified through your projects?
Yeah, so I can go first.
John
Yeah,
first.
so look, there are like certain measures. So there is schemes there, Tom. Like, so be it, look, there's a payment there for introducing or incorporating red clover silage and multi-species. So look, there's a subsidy provided there by the department. These are two measures which are being taken, be it in the action plan or incorporated on farms across the country. So look, we all know how popular red clover and the incorporation of clover into grazing systems and grazing management has been. So look, there is a subsidy there that can be applied for through the ag food, or be your local B&T advisor. So look, that's definitely be it money incentives, and also in terms of it's having a positive impact in reducing overall emissions on farm.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there are some incentives already available that align with the practices that are recommended to reduce emissions. So that's a good point. And you, Niamh, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose actually one of the 12 thematic areas is rewarding mechanisms. So there's going to be more information coming out in that that if you keep an eye out for, it'll be worth tuning into that webinar, because it looks at that element of offering reward for I suppose doing what's needed. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to be able to follow up with as well.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, all tied in then to the carbon farming, which maybe we're maybe a little bit away from here yet in Ireland, but it is coming. So we'll just, as you said, keep an eye on that. There's an interesting question then as well in for Hugh, maybe not totally related to both projects, but I'm hoping one of you can answer it. Is there a simple template for farmers not involved in either project to compare how they are doing on climate mitigation? Maybe John, you mentioned AgNav again. Do you want to lead off on that? Is that maybe where that person should look through an advisor?
Yeah, I can, and look, I'll probably bring Méabh in on this as well. You know, as she's working in the field at the minute. But yeah, look, the AgNav tool is available there, be it through your local B&T advisor or through the climate sustainability advisors. Méabh, do you want to come in on that, because I know that's what you're working on every day?
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to get a plug in there for the Signpost Advisory Programme. So it's a free advisory programme that's available to all farmers, Teagasc clients and non-clients. It's a free service, so farmers can get in contact with their local Teagasc office to sign up for that. The Signpost Advisory Programme, and basically we can get their carbon figure off of that AgNav programme and look at their figures, see how they're performing, and come up with again a similar adaptation plan as what you were discussing for your farmers, John, to help support them improve on their figures. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good. We'll have to charge you for that advertisement, Méabh, maybe. But no, that's a good answer. Maybe just to go to Niamh, and then maybe John might wish to comment as well. On your presentation, you had a picture of 40 advisors from across Europe who attended a training session in Dublin earlier this year. I'm just curious from an advisor perspective, the challenges that the likes of Méabh and other advisors in Ireland face in engaging farmers in thinking about the climate and how agriculture and farming has an impact on the climate, or maybe even how climate impacts on farming is another way of looking at it. You know, from talking to those advisors at that training session in March, are they facing similar challenges to the challenges faced by advisors in Ireland in terms of getting farmers interested in this area?
Yes, and it was, even if the issue, I suppose the challenges are different in a way in terms of what area they're related to. So like Spain now, it's water management or things like that. Nonetheless, the challenges are similar in terms of getting the door open to have that conversation about climate change. But I think it's also interesting in terms of different countries in Europe. They may be focusing more on adaptation measures, whereas in Ireland we're quite focused on mitigation measures. So it's interesting to see how there's even little differences in that front, because I suppose we're feeling it, the likes of it's been non-stop raining and the likes here, whereas in other countries, as John mentioned earlier, Greece has an unprecedented heat wave at the moment. So it's I suppose everyone's trying to adapt and mitigate in different ways, but getting the door open to have that discussion is the key part that we all universally felt similar on.
Okay, now you've mentioned two terms there. I'm going to have to ask you to explain. You had mentioned both adaptation and mitigation. So would you just clarify what's the distinction?
So adaptation would be when you're trying to go, right, we're not getting as much rain. What do we need to put in to adapt to that? So it's like maybe irrigation lagoons if you were doing potato farming over in Scotland, like when the summers are starting to get drier. Whereas mitigation is looking for ways to actually reduce that emissions from going out into the atmosphere. So like breeding strategies in cattle and the likes, or using less for slurry spreading and the likes.
Yeah.
Those type of things would be then more mitigation measures.
Okay, so mitigation is trying to reduce the impact of farming on climate, whereas adaptation is trying to adapt farming to the climate that well, there's plenty of evidence that it is changing. So yeah, okay, that's an interesting point, because I don't think we hear a lot about, or haven't to date heard a lot about adaptation in Ireland, but perhaps that'll be something that'll become more prominent. John, would you like to describe, there are plenty of other colleagues working in your project across Europe. Again, the question of engaging these demonstration farmers and motivating these demonstration farmers to look differently at how they're farming, and to complete these, or to identify actions which they can implement on their farm to reduce emissions.
Yeah, look, definitely, Tom, but maybe just to follow on your last point or Niamh's point is like, look, there has been a shift towards the adaptation measures. So look, it's no surprise to everyone here on this call that the springs have been coming that bit wetter. You know, we were experiencing, I know the weather hasn't been great over the last while, but we experienced I suppose a cold drought, if there's such a thing. Grass growth has been quite slow. So look, whether it's having that extra buffer on farm that farmers aren't going to get caught, you know, with being out without feed or so forth, you know. In relation to the second point then of advisors across Europe, well, look, yeah, the advisors in Western Europe are probably being faced with adverse weather effects, so be it, you know, wetter springs or warmer summers, so as we outlined in Greece and whatnot. So yeah, look, we're definitely basing the action plans around these issues that our farmers are being faced with. So we're not just going out to the farm and completing the audit and saying, look, bang, 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 X, Y, or Z has to be implemented in terms of mitigation measures. Okay, so look, we're trying to have a mix or a blend of the adaptation and the mitigation measures to suit each plan. So no more than Maeve's point in relation to no two farms are the same, no two audits are the same, or no two AMP or adaptation or action plans are the same as well. So look, there's a bit of work going into them plans, and look, that's what we can see across Europe as well with the other advisors, or the 140 or 60 or 50, sorry, advisors that are involved in the Climate Farm demo.
Okay. Maeve, do you want to ask any final question?
Well, I suppose you know, there's just questions there about like how climate is kind of coming front and center in terms of whether it's politics, whether it's funding from the EU and that. So just for both Niamh and John, I might go to you first, Niamh. You know, what would you like to see prioritized? Do you know, would it be expansion of the likes of the ClimateSmart Programme or more new initiatives like that? Like what sort of measures would you like to see prioritized to try and help us to achieve our targets?
Well, I suppose in the nice way possible, there's a lot of projects there. So I suppose getting them that they're all moving on a unified front would be something that I'd like to see, because there's a lot of really good quality projects that are doing great work, but then having it that the information is shared more so across would be something that I would like to see more of, because I think that way everything's moving together rather than everyone running to the goals individually. I think would be something that I would think would make a big difference, because there's very good quality projects going on and they're all doing different elements, but it'd be nice to see them overlapping more.
Yeah, absolutely. And yourself, John, what would you like to see kind of being prioritized going forward?
Yeah, so look, the more than working in the same line as yourself, Maeve, look, the AgNav tool is probably a great tool or facility there that we have. So look, if we could get more farmers to become aware of their own, I suppose, CO2 or kilos of CO2 per kilo of output, be it on the beef side or the dairy side, like, you know, and to have them figures, I suppose, in the public eye a bit more. So look, years ago, ICBF would have had the calving reports, or they would have had the co-op reports or whatnot, and farmers were probably saying, Jesus, what are these? So look, it takes a bit of time for one, the advisors to get their head around it, but two, the farmers. So look, it's definitely something going forward that I'd like to see on all the reports, or be it on a farm visit, is the kilos of emissions on farm.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to kind of highlight the importance of the ClimateSmart project, though, is like it's all well and good having all of this research and everything going on in the background, but if we don't have the tools and mechanisms there to get it implemented on the ground among your everyday farmers, then we're at nothing. So it's great to have a program and a project like this that's helping to do that. So so it's great to see.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that. I think there's also maybe opportunities to look at further incentives for farmers. You know, John mentioned the likes of the Red Clover scheme. You know, if there were other incentives developed to make it more attractive for farmers to take on the additional cost of making a change, I think that could be very helpful. And I think the big one there is in the area of the methane reducing feed and slurry additives. You know, that they're working at research level, but they're going to cost. They're going to cost, and you know, I suppose there's a question or over whether farmers will be willing to pay the cost. So, yeah, so I suppose that's the other thing. You know, there are technologies that, if they're to be implemented, will cost farmers money, and I think that needs to be discussed. So that might be something else. Okay, I think we're just up against our time, so I'm going to draw this morning's webinar to a close. So I'd like to firstly thank our contributors this morning, John Greaney and Niamh Barry. I'd also like to thank my colleague Méabh O'Hagan for assisting with questions. And in the background, we had the assistance of Yvonne Marr, who set up the webinar and got it running. On next week's Signpost Series webinar, we will be joined by Professor Conor Murphy from Maynooth University. It's another webinar related to the climate, and the title of his presentation next week is A Clear Climate Change Signal in Irish Weather and Extremes. And I think that should be very, very interesting. So that brings this morning's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank you all for participating, for contributing to our question and answer session, and wish you all the best for the rest of today. Thank you.